We know that her name is Fernanda. We know that her name is Fiona. We know that her name is Flor. We know that her name is Flora. We know that her name is Francesca. Y en español, we know that her name is Francesca. We know that her name is Francis. Y en español, we know that her name is Francis. O en sudamericano, we know that her name is Francis. Y otra vez en inglés, we know that her name is Francis. We know that her name is Francisca. We know that her name is Francisca. We know that her name is Francisca, con las tres versiones. We know that her name is Gabine. We know that her name is Gabriela. We know that her name is Garcia. Y en castellano con th, theta, we know that her name is Garcia. We know that her name is Gemma. Y en inglés, we know that her name is Gemma. We know that her name is Gemma. We know that her name is Gemma. We know that her name is Genevieve. We know that her name is Genevieve. Imagino que estaba así en español. We know that her name is Georgina. We know that her name is Georgina. Con las dos versiones. We know that her name is Gia. We know that her name is Gina. We know that her name is Georgia. We know that her name is Giovanna. We know that her name is Gloria. We know that her name is Grazia. Y en castellano, we know that her name is Gracia. We know that her name is Greta. We know that her name is Guadalupe. We know that her name is Hala. We know that her name is Hannah. We know that her name is Haley. We know that her name is Hazel. We know that her name is He. We know that her name is Helen. We know that her name is Helga. We know that her name is Hen. We know that her name is Hind. Y por si acaso, we know that her name is Hind. We know that her name is Hong. We know that her name is Ida. Y por si acaso, we know that her name is Ida. We know that her name is Iliana. We know that her name is Ines. We know that her name is Ingrid. We know that her name is Irene. Y en castellano, we know that her name is Irene. We know that her name is Irina. We know that her name is Iris. Y en castellano, we know that her name is Iris. We know that her name is Emma. We know that her name is Isabel. We know that her name is Isabella. We know that her name is Ivana. We know that her name is Yvonne. We know that her name is Iyad. Y por si acaso, we know that her name is Ayad. We know that her name is Isabella. We know that her name is Jacinta. Segunda versión, we know that her name is Jacinta. Tercera versión, we know that her name is Jacinta. We know that her name is Jackie. We know that her name is Jacqueline. We know that her name is Jamie. We know that her name is Jane. We know that her name is Janice. We know that her name is Jasmine. Y en castellano, we know that her name is Yasmin. En sudamericano, we know that her name is Yasmin. Otra vez. We know that her name is Yasmin. We know that her name is Jennifer. We know that her name is Yennefer. La segunda en castellano. We know that her name is Jenny. We know that her name is Jenny, con el más españolizado. We know that her name is Jessica. Y más español. We know that her name is Jessica. We know that her name is Jamina. Y otra vez. We know that her name is Jimena. Tercera vez. We know that her name is Jimena. We know that her name is Jing. We know that her name is Jing. We know that her name is Joe. We know that her name is Joanna. We know that her name is Johanna. Y españolizando 200 y 201, we know that her name is Joanna. We know that her name is Joanna.